Financial empowerment is the mission of the U.S. Black Chambers. The USBC supports economic growth and entrepreneurship in the African American community. I'm very happy to have the organization's president, Ron Busby, join me in the studio today because he's a really busy guy. Starting today is the three-day conference, right?
Correct.
And it is chock full of plenaries and just important speakers. We've got Jesse Jackson and Sheila Johnson and woo!
Yeah, we're very excited about this week's agenda. This is our 4th annual conference. And more than just a conference, it's our School of Chamber and Business Management.
Explain that to me.
Sure, good question. I think, I used to be a chamber president, so I know how difficult it is to be out in the field and to have the responsibility of leading your community, many times small as well as large businesses, trying to be the face as well as the voice to both political agendas, business agendas, many times social and economic agendas. And sometimes you feel like you're alone and you need resources to be able to move our agenda forward. And so 2010, which was our 2nd year, we had our first School of Chamber Management here in Washington, D.C. And it was so well received that we've continued to do it, and now this is our 4th year. Very excited. We're having it at the new Marriott Marquis here in Washington, D.C., which
Black-owned. Very, very proud of that, aren't we?
We really are. It just shows that when African Americans are really given the opportunity, what we can do.
That's right.
And what you'll see at the Marriott Marquis is that not only do you have an African American owner, but you'll see managers, you'll see staff, you'll see the valet, you'll see people that look like Washington, D.C. And we're very proud of what Norm has done. And what we're doing is really bringing African Americans together. African Americans are one of the largest spenders.
Yes.
We spend over $1 trillion, and much of that is spent in the hotel industry. And so we're bringing organizations, including the National Urban League, the NAACP, and others, to say that we're going to do our conferences in Black-owned hotels across the country.
When you say that a lot of the money is spent in hotels, what does that mean? I mean, how are we spending our money? Are we taking trips and staying in hotels, or going to the bar?
African Americans, we're doing some of that. We do a lot of conferences. We're notorious for doing conventions, meetings, banquets, luncheons.
I hope something's coming out of all of this.
Sometimes just the idea and the opportunity to network with other African Americans is an important thing. But we need to be demonstrating our ability to take that $1 trillion of spend and really have an agenda with the dollars. It's ironic that in the Asian community, the average dollar stays within that community 21 days.
Not for us.
In the Hispanic community, it's 14 days.
What is it for?
The average African-American dollar stays in our community less than 6 hours.
It's insane. And when you do go to African-American communities, you will find that there are Asians who have set up shop there. The liquor store, the local liquor, all these things that used to be Black-owned even back in the day,
Correct.
are just owned by others. What's up with us?
Well, I think a couple things have happened. I think, for one, African Americans can now own businesses wherever. We no longer are dedicated to the MLK Street.
Right, that's right. That's exactly right.
Back when I was a child, my father and I could go out on a Saturday morning. We could get our hair done. We could get our shoes fixed. We could shop, and we knew the business owners. 95% of all African American businesses are now home-based. So we're not necessarily brick and mortar. Of the 1.9 million African American owned businesses that we operate across the country, 1.8 million of them are single owners or entrepreneurs. So they're not necessarily mom and pop, they're mom or pop. So we have to figure out ways to increase our spend to find those businesses. And so one of the things that we're doing tomorrow is to actually lay out our new mobile app. It's
That's
the
great.
USBC mobile app. We're very excited about that. And we feel like it will do a couple things. One, it will drive that traffic that we so desperately are looking for African Americans to spend with other African Americans, but also it will give us the knowledge of when we're going into business, what we may look at. Traditionally, we've gone into the same sectors of business. And so often—
And what are those sectors?
Usually service type businesses, a lot of restaurants, some construction, but there's a litany of businesses that we spend money with, but we don't own or operate. And so, for instance, if I go to my mobile app and I say I'm looking for a Black-owned bagel shop and there's not one in my community, that may be something that I might be interested in doing as opposed to going into another barbecue or fish or hair salon. Things that we aren't traditionally in, we still spend money. And in African Americans, we still support African Americans. We just need to know where they are,
Right.
how to find them. The second thing is we spend lots of dollars on the web. About 70% of African Americans shop online. Ironically, only about 17% of all African American businesses have a presence online.
Well, I want to stop you here for a second because
Sure.
this is something that bugs me. We make up, African Americans make up 13% of the population. We spend, as you said, about $1 trillion a year. And when I was in Houston, I talked to a couple of the big advertising agencies and I called them on the carpet and I said, you know, I don't see a lot of advertising toward this community when we spend so much money. And you're able to segment where we're spending the money. I mean, especially, you know, you've got access to some data showing where we spend the money. But we are not included in the advertising. It is like we're invisible when we are spending so much money.
There's a twofold conversation, and we will have that conversation tomorrow. We'll have actually Cheryl McPherson from the Nielsen report come in and demonstrate and showcase exactly where African Americans are spending our money. And that gives us the knowledge. Again, I think data is only data, but once it's turned into information,
That's
then it
right.
can be turned into knowledge, and then we can do something with
Yes.
it. For so often we're shaking trees, apples are falling off, and we don't have the buckets to be able to pick up the apples. So it's one thing for us to go in and demand that Google hire more African Americans, or it's another thing for us to go and demand that Yahoo spend more money with African Americans. But we have to have the firms that have the size, the scale, and the expertise to be able to compete and have sustainability. And so that's where you have to have a Chamber of Commerce. Our slogan that I've created says that in order for there to be a strong America, you have to have a strong Black America.
That's right.
And in order to have a strong Black America, you have to have strong Black-owned businesses.
Right.
And in order to have strong Black-owned businesses, you have to have successful Black chambers. And so that's the role that we play. We're critical in our 5 pillars: advocacy, ensuring that our voices are being heard here in Washington, D.C. in policy issues. Access to capital is the #1 concern of all small business owners.
Yes, it is. We just had a business.
I heard the young man talk about his ability to save, and that's great. But in 2012, the SBA, which was really built to make small business loans, 2012 they made about 8.6% of all their loans that were guaranteed by SBA to African American firms.
Okay.
In 2013, that number dropped to 1.7%.
What?
They
Wow.
now want to make profitable loans. So a profitable loan is usually a larger size loan. The average loan that they made was about $454,000, and they want to increase that to $500,000.
Oh.
The average African American business is only doing less than $250,000.
Right.
So the idea that we will ever be able to actually go and compete for the loans that we need to start, grow, and expand businesses, we're always going to be getting denied, not because we aren't successful business owners or that we don't have the acumen or the credit scores. We don't have the size and the scale that they're even interested in. And so we hope to announce a major announcement here this week where we will be in certain markets making small business loans through local chambers like the ones that we have currently in South Carolina. Yes.
Ron, do you engage the upper class African Americans who, as individuals, as I was discussing with this gentleman, could be angel investors, but people who are also part of funds that are looking for people with good ideas, but funds that are run by African Americans, because a lot of times people are going to the traditional route of funding, and they're finding that they're running against white Americans who don't quite understand their concept or don't want to, whatever the case might be.
Sure.
This is, again, keeping it in the community. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm wanting upper class African Americans to step up to the plate and to help support some of these businesses.
If African Americans and middle class just spent, the average African American spent about 3% of their income with African Americans. If we could get that number to 10%, we'd have unemployment wiped away in our community. We would be able to hire 1 million additional African Americans. Equity is the key conversation that I hear you talking about. African American equity funds are there. We need to be able to connect the dots, and we'll be talking about this week. There's also crowdfunding. which is very
Absolutely. Kickstarter,
traditional.
all of, yeah.
Which
Absolutely.
is very
Kickstarter, all of, yeah.
Blackcrowdfunding.net. African Americans have been traditionally creators of alternative financing. We've
'Cause
just
we've
always
had
had
to.
to be. Exactly. The loan process has always been there, but we've been creative and we've been successful, and we have to continue to be creative and being successful in order for us to have long-term sustainability in our communities.
Ron Busby, President and CEO of U.S. Black Chambers, thank you so much for dropping by on what is going to be a very busy next couple of days. I'll see you at the event, and we appreciate your advice and appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
All right.
We look forward to seeing you as well as your audience.
Thank you. We'll be right back.